In your hands, ngā mihi nui kia kōrua, welcome.
Kia ora. My name is Amy Hogan and I'm here with my colleague Rebekah Graham, and we are the co-chairs of Access Matters Aotearoa. Our work here today is as a pan-disability organisation who are working to make the best of this bill and to give as much opportunity for individuals to feed and input onto the bill as it stands and to prepare things for the future. We believe, as has been carefully laid out by previous submissions, that we are kaitiaki and guardians of so many stories about accessibility from all over the disability community. We come from a blind perspective, we come from physical access needs, we come from disabilities around learning, and all of these have access fundamentally at their heart. If we can't access a building, we can't access the information. If we can't access the information, we can't access the building. So access is very much beyond simply putting a ramp on the side of a building. And we want to reinforce the previous submission that we're not asking to be entirely punitive. We're not saying that we're going to go down to the local mom and pop cafe and say, we're going to shut you down because you don't have a perfectly angled ramp and that's it, you're writing out. What we're asking for is for this bill that everybody has worked hard on to be the starting point beyond all the information that you've already heard about our obligations to the New Zealand Disability Strategy, our obligations to the UN. We need to have a pathway to make access three-dimensional, to make access meaningful, not only for the current disabled citizen, but for the disabled citizens of the future. The classic joke is that everybody comes to disability at some point. I just came to it earlier than everyone else. So if I could pass on to my colleague Rebekah to expand on a few points.
Thanks, Amy. My name's Rebekah Graham and I'm here in my role as co-chair for the Access Matters. We were also, like Amy, involved with Access Alliance in developing the bill, and I think it is one of our greatest disappointments that what we asked for as part of the Alliance has not been put into the bill, and what we asked for was a regulatory mechanism or some form of enforcement so that there was a way to make access happen. As you've heard this morning, there isn't currently a regulatory framework or a mechanism for following that up, so it just gets put in there. Oh, wouldn't it be nice? Like, nobody ever says, oh, we don't want disabled people to have access. Everybody always says, yes, this is important, yes. But when it comes to putting it in, it's always, oh, well, you know, we've only got so much money, or, oh, you know, we need to do these other things first, or, oh, you know, so it's always excuse after excuse, and it never actually, you know, gets done. And the other thing that we are aware of, a little controversial, but I'm going to put it out there, our experience is that it's not businesses that are the problem here. Businesses we have found to be incredibly supportive. They love the idea of access. They know that it increases their customer base. They are far more behind it than government departments are. And certain departments really struggled to support the bill. It was a huge challenge getting it across the line. And one of those reasons is that it was actually ministries and government workers in there that did not want to do this work, and that is so heartbreaking to hear. Like, I think government should be, and particularly ministries, should be world leaders. You know, they should be leading the pack. They should be the ones setting the example. They should be the ones absolutely advocating for their people. And it was one of just a real heartbreak to understand that the challenge politically was deemed too hard. And so, as Amy has said, what we would really like is for you guys as select committee to recommend some changes to the bill, to progress the bill, to get it in there, to get it in Parliament, but for it to be the beginning of the conversation and for it to continue to be reviewed regularly in terms of how are we regulating it, how can we regulate it better, what do we need to do, those real practical things. And I really, I'm talking with Amy, she made a lovely comment about we can walk and chew gum at the same time. And what Amy meant about that was we can do more than one access at a time. Like, we're not limited to just, oh, we're just going to make sure that we have braille on bus stops. We can do a whole raft of things across a whole range of ministries all at the same time in order to provide access. So we have made our presentation super short because we wanted to give heaps of time for questions, because we thought some of you might have lots of questions, and 15 minutes isn't very long. So if you have questions, you guys have got 8 minutes, maybe 9 minutes for questions.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both for a great submission. Look, you've got so much information in here, so thank you. It's been, you know, it's very, very useful and helpful to have it all in the one place. So I'm interested in if you could just speak a little bit around the 3 versus 5 year review, and just how you've come to 3 years rather than a 5 year process, or the reasoning for that. Thank you.
Cool. A couple of things there. 1, 3 year is a government term, and so it pushes every government that is in government to have to review it and to make changes. It can't be shifted off for whoever's next. But also, you know, when you think about a 3 year review, by the time those reviews is reviewed, you've made your recommendations, those recommendations get implemented, it ends up being closer to 5 years. And I think it's really important to understand that a review process isn't just the time between reviews, it's the time from the review to the implementation. And having it at a 3 year one means that in practical terms, it will end up being 5 years by the time the changes get implemented. Amy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Great, that's really clear. Thank you. I'll come now to Jan Logie.
Tēnā kōrua, thanks for a great submission. I'm interested in a couple of points. So one, like, I'm hearing you've at the end, you're saying you support the bill subject to the inclusion of extending the scope to PCBUs, a 3 yearly review, timely accountability to House of Reps, enforceable, accessible standards, independent regulator, barrier notification, disputes resolution process. So thank you for that, like, super clear communication. Do you think that's achievable before the election for us to make a bill with all of those changes in that time frame? That's the first question. There might be follow-on.
I guess it depends how committed Parliament is to this bill. It would be, yeah, it is entirely possible to write something and get it through, and Diane, all credit to Diane who pulled together a lot of that information, she's amazing. There is stuff that already exists that we can use in terms of legislation. I mean, Warren Forrester's done a heap of work there. There is already stuff there, you don't have to start from scratch, that you could use if you were committed to getting the bill across and making it meaningful.
And also, we are experts at being disappointed, so it wouldn't surprise us if it doesn't progress, but we can be hopeful. We're doing all this work on the presumption that something will get across.
Thank you. If I could, just as a kind of a follow-up, I also noted like that is a clear point around Warren Forster's research and having a base there that's considered the legal context here. You also, in your the earlier part of your written submission, saying you think it's essential that New Zealand is fully accessible by 2035. I'm wondering whether you also support a change to have a clear purpose with that time frame in it, as well as the other things that you mentioned.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Right, we'll move on to Dr. Liz Craig.
Okay, well, thank you both for a really comprehensive submission. In your written submission, you talk about access denied diaries, and I just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that and how you're sharing that information, with people at the moment, and in the new, looking ahead, how you'd like to see that sort of dealt with in future in terms of having a plug-in point with decision makers or people who are thinking about accessibility, about how those experiences could be sort of shared more formally.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that was a great initiative because we understood when we were doing work sort of last year that actually a lot of able-bodied people are completely clueless when it comes to access barriers. Like, they just, because they don't experience them, they don't know. And it was just a way to showcase really clear, specific examples that people experience, and to show how easy it is to get that information. Like, you could literally set up a website where people could report their barriers, real easy. It wasn't hard to do. It wasn't a lot of work. I mean, it wasn't a lot of, you know what I mean? It wasn't like, it was quite a simple thing to do. We wanted to show that it's really easy to identify barriers if you provide a way to do it that's accessible, where people can just put in, this is the barrier, this is what happened to me, this is where it was. And it would be amazing if we could do that on a regular part, so that then government has a whole host of stuff that you can see straight away. Oh, this is a common barrier. We don't have braille at bus stops. Nobody knows when the bus is coming. We don't announce bus stops. Audio, using audio, so nobody knows where to get, like, and then you've got a whole list of different things that you can work on simultaneously. Amy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Okay, no, that's really useful. Thank you for that.
You're on mute. Oh, sorry. Is that me, Angie?
Sorry.
You're on mute.
I said Maureen, and then if we have time, I'll have a further question. Sorry, everyone.
Amy, I know you said that your experts are being disappointed, and so to avoid that, and also taking into account your comment about walking and chewing gum, Rebekah, if we were able, how would you suggest that we embed in this bill that will become legislation the priorities for the Accessibility Committee to start work on? Or do you think it's enough to enable them to set the priorities, which is basically what the bill does? But to your point, it's going to be years before that's actioned. So do you think it would lock it in if it was able to be embedded in this particular piece of legislation? And how would you go about setting those priorities?
You go, Rebekah.
I think that's a really interesting question, because when I talk with, when we listen to what disabled people are saying, they're not saying we want you to set priorities. They're saying we just want some action on something. God damn it, anything. Good God, gravy, please, for the love of God. And I think that asking to set priorities is a real able-bodied thing, because that's how we work. But if you think about what disabled people are saying, they have talked again and again and again about information being accessible. I mean, we saw that with the civil defence recently with the floods. The civil defence should have been able to provide their information in accessible formats. They did not. They didn't even know how to communicate with the very excellent systems that we already have set up to produce accessible formats. They didn't know who to talk to. They didn't know that you could talk to, like, there's a whole department. You just have to literally email them and say, hey, we need some accessible formats, and da 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 da. So that, again, it already exists and it's there, but because it's not of value, nobody bothered to follow it up. So I don't know if it's about setting priorities per se, as it is about saying our expectation is that all governments will do X, Y, Z, provide accessible information, have accessible websites, and that all our new builds, for example, the built environment's often huge, so we already have building standards around accessibility, but they're not enforceable, and that's a real challenge. Like, you could literally just enforce the standards we already have, and that would be a massive step forward.
Thanks, Rebecca and Amy. We have actually come to time now. Really appreciate your submission and all the written detail as well. I know there's a lot of thought gone into this, so we really appreciate it, and we have heard you. So thank you so much. Ka kite.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.